Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 26th of April 2023. Before we go to the front line, to our northeastern axis, let's look at and see what the ISW, Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, has to say in their preamble for their daily report. Some interesting observations. Senior US and EU officials assessed that Russian President Putin would remain unwilling to negotiate in response to a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive. Of course, the question is, will he be forced to negotiate? He may be unwilling, but he might have no other option. This is the issue I've talked about many times before, which is the more successful the Ukrainians are, the more problematic that becomes for kind of trying to second guess what Putin would do with his back against the wall. He might flail even more violently. So could he do something completely irrational and stupid, or would he be forced to the negotiation table, given that his position becomes even more precarious? A Ukrainian military official claimed on the 25th, that's yesterday, that Ukrainian forces are achieving, quote, impressive results in counter-battery combat against Russian forces on the Russian-occupied eastern left bank of Dnipro. So I have said this before. I said this explicitly a few weeks back, that I'm sure the Ukrainians are doing counter-battery fire and are trying to take out the Russian artillery on the east bank of the Dnipro, because that has been battering places like Kherson for some time. And indeed, we have seen less and less, with fewer bits of video footage coming out of Kherson being hit by artillery. And I think that is precisely because they've been so successful, the Ukrainians, in counter-battery activity in that particular region. And indeed, that is what Huminyuk, the spokesperson, says of the area, that they're working to clear the front line on the east bank in a counter-battery mode, adding that Russian forces are evacuating civilians from Dnipro riverbank area to move in Russian units, which is simplifying Ukrainian operations. Yeah, move out the civilians, then we can just hammer the area, because we know it's military personnel that are remaining. So recently there's been this talk. ISW said that perhaps the relationship between Prigozhin and the MOD has somewhat softened, but Prigozhin himself denied that. So Wagner Group financier Prigozhin denied that 22nd of April assessment about limited improvements in relations ahead of the planned Ukrainian counteroffensive. So he's very clear that he's still not getting on with the MOD. Anyway, let's get to the front line. We're going to go to our usual opening sector, the axis from Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna in the northeast here. And on my map, that looks like this. We've got Kupiansk up here, Svatva here, and Kreminna down there by the forest area. There will not be much talk of activity in this area. The ISW says that the Russians claim they have made advances, or Russian mill bloggers have claimed they've made advances in Nevska, Makivka, and Shpirna. That is to say, Makivka here, Nevska just further down south of that. When it turns up, Nevska, Makivka, and Shpirna, which is down here towards Bakhmut. There is Shpirna there. It's not turning up. There it is. So usual kind of stuff. Nothing to really worry about. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces continue to fortify positions in the Kupiansk direction and did not conduct ground attacks in the Liman direction. Geolocated footage, and I'm going to check this out. Is this going to be a case of the ISW thinking an advance is an advance when actually we've had that on the maps for some time? So the claim is geolocated footage published yesterday indicates that Russian forces likely captured Karmazinivka on an unspecified date. Oh, so they might well have taken some territory here. Let's see where that is. So this is what they're referring to. The Ukrainian 66th Brigade shells buildings occupied by Russian soldiers. So we have Russian occupation of this area. Let's go and plug that into our Google Maps to see whether this is newly acquired territory for the Russians. And here it is. No, it's well behind their lines. And I haven't changed those lines there for probably certainly weeks, maybe even months. So is that a newly under the control of the Russians? No, That's in fact that the evidence provided there, the geolocation shows that even further behind the Russian lines than just that settlement, so the back end of that settlement. So again, what this is more likely is that right now we have, so the ISW is saying, right, we definitely have evidence that they control that now. Before, we may have had front lines, but there wasn't necessarily hard evidence that the Russians controlled that. Now there is hard geolocated evidence, but as far as my map is concerned, that entails no mapping changes. Still, these claims of, about Chervonopopivka, I'm not exactly sure who controls what. The Syriac maps will differ from deep state map in that area. It could be that the Russians have indeed retaken the territory that they had lost a week or so ago. Okay, that is pretty much that sector, and we're going to come down to Bakhmut now. I will go to Poulet Volon's map as we get towards Bakhmut. He has two, or they have two yellow arrows denoting Ukrainian pushes, if not advances, in the area of Bilorivka and from Vuhledar, which is interesting. There are no red arrows in this whole area. So that is a significant plus, I guess, for the Ukrainians, that they are pushing back there and activity is in their favor, or at least they are on the offensive. So that is, as you can see here, just south of the forest in the Bilorivka area from Vuhledar, going northeast and moving, trying to take back territory that they had lost a little bit of territory, Ukrainians, in the Bilorivka area. Okay, then we get on to Bakhmut. I guess we'll go first to look at the War Mapper map from yesterday, saying that the Russians continue to advance west through the city, west of the railway lines here. And as you can see, arrows kind of all around, but certainly new territory as far as the War Mapper map is concerned in that particular area there. But otherwise, no other control changes, no reports. The pro-Ukrainian mapper says, brief look at the front in Bakhmut. It was relatively quiet today, no confirmed positional changes. The areas with the black dotted lines are believed to be under Russian control given the recent advances on the flanks, but it must be visually confirmed. And that's a kind of area that I think War Mapper was signifying there, and perhaps area to the north as well. But other than that, no mapping changes. We'll go to ISW, see what they say. So actually, let's try and do this in a geographically sensible way. Before we just get down to ISW and what it says about, I'm going to start from the northern area. Rebar, the pro-Russian source, says about Spirina, fierce fighting has been going on in Spirina area for several months. Russian troops have knocked out Ukrainian units from the gas compressor station, which I showed you, which was a key point of the AFU defense in the settlement. I did show you that the other day. So there was movement that for the Russians to the west, and this area there, that gas compressor area, I think that's what they're referring to, which has tunnels underneath it. It seems that that is now under Russian control. But anyway, as we go to the north, there are claims that there's fierce fighting in Orokovo, Vasilivka. We go to the ISW. It says one Mil blogger claimed that fighting is intensifying northwest of Bakhmut near Orokovo, Vasilivka, and Novomakova, which is around there. So in that general direction, there is fierce fighting. And then their Syriac maps claims that, where are you here? So the situation Bakhmut, and this is their only map change in the Bakhmut area. This is from a slightly 3D point of view. The Russian army broke the first defense line of the Ukrainian army north of Kreminna. Despite the latest reports, Russians haven't entered in the town yet, as some of the trench system is still under Ukrainian control. So this suggests that, just to let you know, where there's been fighting over the trench systems just here, north of this road that's coming in, which is the 00506 road. There's actually been some gains, according to Syriac maps, of the Russians here. So that area that you see here, that the Russians have gained, pertains to here. The yellow lines are the pro-Ukrainian map, deep state map, and the red lines are Syriac maps, which is pro-Russian mapper. Okay, so that is some activity taking place there. The ISW does say that Ukrainian forces repelled ground attacks near Bodonivka, Novomakova, Kromova, and Klishchivka, which is south. Eastern group of forces spokesperson Colonel Cherevati has stated that Wagner Group forces can no longer conduct combat operations without support from Russian airborne forces and special purposes units, which Cherevati characterized as becoming increasingly active in the Bakhmut area. It's very interesting. So Wagner really are struggling with numbers of troops on the ground. It appears that their capability has been somewhat blunted, and so they are relying very much more on regular Russian forces to do the job in and around Bakhmut. Now, here we have claims that if we come down here, Ukrainian forces conducted a localized counterattack northwest of Bakhmut, likely to alleviate pressure against the logistics line passing through Kreminna. Geolocated footage posted yesterday. Of course, if it's posted yesterday, it might have happened the day before, so things might have changed, right? Shows Ukrainian forces overtaking Russian positions north of that 00504 highway. So let's go and have a look at that. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian counterattack was unsuccessful, however, but we do have quite a lot of footage to suggest that it was successful. Here are several parts of this footage. I'm not going to show it to you because it's pretty inappropriate. It shows people getting shot very clearly. But here we have different geolocations of that shootout. So we have shelling that's taking place here. Let's go and plug that in, see what we get. So yeah, that's right where we would expect it to be, given that was what the Russians took previously. So that would suggest that yes, that is a counterattack. We have a shootout going on here. If I can actually copy and paste. So yeah, shootout going on in this location. So that is just right next door. So all of those geolocations are going to be, right on the edge of that road. Now, the Ukrainians claiming they've taken it back, but Russians denying that. However, that says nothing about the claims further to the east over there. So that's, I think there's going to be heavy fighting going on there. The Ukrainians are going to want to keep this road open, but the net is closing. There's some people saying, it's not looking good for the Ukrainians in the west of Bakhmut anymore. It's, they've been saying this for a long time, but if you take someone like Kenneth Gregg, the Swedish fighter in the area, if I can find him, he seems to be quite negative about what's going on. No good news from Bakhmut. At the road through Kreminna, no changes. Information that the enemy has occupied Kreminna is false. In the city itself, the enemy has made significant progress along the entire contact line, except for the aircraft area. According to preliminary data, the enemy reached the intersection of Uvilnenia and Chaikovskogo Street. They are gathering reserves and conducting artillery preparations for the final assault on the western part of Bakhmut. It has been hard enough in Bakhmut over the last 4 months because of the Russians' artillery. Now the narrowing, and this is important, now the narrowing of the control zone has reinforced this hell many times over. Our defenders, soldiers in the armed forces and territorial defense forces, state special transport service and special operations forces, state border guard service and others are doing everything to hold on to the western part of the city for as long as possible. But in the current situation, the most important thing is to save the lives of the personnel who have already done everything in their power. As you've already guessed, it looks like the reinforcement of the Russians with the artillery brigade from Avdivka and its ammunition is enough to wipe out the rest of the buildings in the western part of the city. Artillery will offer similar suites, but having personnel inside a zone that will be subject to one of the biggest artillery duels in this war is not feasible. We have to get out of there. So what he's saying is that there have been artillery reinforcements from Avdivka active in the area, and that as the Ukrainians get pushed into smaller and smaller area, and this is a horrible turn of phrase because it refers to human beings, but it's like shooting fish in a barrel as far as the Russians are concerned. So you have an ever more concentrated area here of Ukrainian forces, then you can just flatten that with artillery and take out those forces much more easily than, if the Ukrainians are to hit the Russians, they're going to be far more spread out in this general area because of, controlling a far larger area. So that is the situation there. There are some more claims. Geolocated footage posted on April 24th shows that Wagner Group forces made marginal advances southwest of the Bakhmut 2 railway station in eastern Bakhmut. And this is planting a flag on top of the building here. So they definitely control this building. it would appear. And that is right where we knew that they had taken this land a couple of days ago. So that fits in with the evidence that we have. And then one more, the Russians taking a prisoner, although some people are saying this is staged in retaliation to, well, not in retaliation, the idea that Prigozhin said that they weren't going to take any prisoners, they're going to kill prisoners, and then they got this very staged seeming video of taking someone prisoner from some drone footage, but people are saying, yeah, that wasn't actually a Ukrainian. And indeed, if that happened yesterday, that's quite far behind the lines that we already had. So, yeah, nothing unusual there as far as where we'd expect to see the Russians. So interesting that although Kenneth Gregg, for example, is saying that things are all quite negative and we should get out of there, the lines hadn't really changed on the east and the southwest. So that is what is happening in Bakhmut. We'll now go to, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, let's look at a pro-Russian source here. Russian troops continue their offensive in Bakhmut center, says Rybar, pushing the enemy out of the city. Assault units have entered Polova Street and breached the first line of Ukrainian defense near the garage complex. In the south of Bakhmut, fighting in the area of the Vodol Canal, on the outskirts of which there are still scattered Ukrainian units. To the west, Russian troops are breaking through in the direction of the road to Krasna, though through which the enemy grouping is supplied. Now, I'm not sure of the truth of that. That is to say that there is fighting and the Russians have broken through in the south and towards the canal area. Indeed, it appears that the Russians have actually lost ground in the canal area over the last week. They lost ground around here and then a little bit more around here on a subsequent day. So I'm not sure that I would believe Rybar without seeing further evidence of that there. And finally, Poulet Volon's map of the area. As you can see, this is where the Ukrainians have ceded territory over the last few days, but I don't think that actually happened yesterday. That's just his mapping catching up there. And this is what it looks like from a general overview. The Ukrainians pushing back north of Kremova, trying to get control over area around this highway. But they are relying more on this highway to the south through Ivanivska to supply their troops in Bakhmut. Now, the last thing I'm going to say on Bakhmut, it refers to Colonel General Sursky. He's the guy in charge of the forces there. He's been interviewed and he's got some interesting things to say that I think is really worth exposing here or exhibiting here, because it gives you, well, at least, you might say that this is just from a propagandistic psyops point of view, but this seems to lay out exactly what the rationale is for the troops, or at least for the Ukrainian command in Bakhmut. So what is the military expediency of such a long defense of Bakhmut, or in simple words, what does it give us? He is asked. And he says, the battle for Bakhmut is important not only for the enemy, but also for us. For several months in this area, we have been holding back the enemy's offensive and preventing them from expanding their front line. In addition, we are inflicting significant losses on the enemy by destroying their most powerful units, weapons, and military equipment. The continued retention of Bakhmut is important for our defense for several reasons. The city is an important defense hub, and maintenance of which ensures the sustainability of the defense of the group of troops as a whole. Bakhmut is a well-located natural fortress surrounded by rivers and situated on hills, which facilitates defense. The defense of the city is also facilitated by the presence of multi-story buildings and developed infrastructure on the left bank of the Bakhmutivka River, where our troops are defending. The battle to capture the city is a specific type of combat that requires special skills and creates difficulties for Russian troops who are attacking in the forest steppe. Bakhmut is part of the Konstantinivka-Kramatorsk agglomeration, the retention of which prevents the enemy from reaching the flank and rear of our troops in the Lysychansk and Donetsk sectors. So in other words, keeping the fight going on here allows them to hold this line of defense going from Druskivka through Kramatorsk to Sloviansk and really possibly to Siversk. So Bakhmut is the key to holding these. It might not have intrinsic value in and of itself. There's no particular value of holding Bakhmut. It doesn't give you anything other than what it gives you extrinsically, which is it gives you the chance to hold on to these cities. These don't then become the front line, or Chasiv Yar doesn't then become the front line, and then it's into the next city and the next city. But also, it's naturally slightly easier to defend than possibly other places because of the natural geography of the area, but also the high-rise buildings in Bakhmut. So then Interfax asks, have the tactics of Russian troops in the east changed recently? And he says, of course, the enemy analyzes the results of his actions, draws certain conclusions, and improves his troops' tactics. For example, in each brigade or regiment, separate storm assault units have been formed on the basis of motorized infantry companies reinforced by tanks, flamethrowers, mortar, and anti-tank units to recover lost positions. To create favorable conditions for assault operations, the enemy actively uses tank and artillery units, including from enclosed firing positions, inflicts heavy fire on our troops, destroys positions, and then launches an assault. In the course of assault operations, UAVs are always used, which allows the enemy to adjust artillery fire, and the group commander can effectively manage subordinate personnel. In urban environments, the enemy uses lengthy artillery attacks to fire on the target. A group of 10 people with small arms storms the attacked object directly. Military equipment is rarely used. So think about Bakhmut. Military equipment is really not used a lot. And tanks, APCs, all those kind of things, they're just kind of absent. You might see the odd one. The attack is usually carried out in 3 to 4 waves. The losses of the assault group are promptly replenished by an evacuation group from distribution points. Assault group commanders use smartphones with special software called Alpine Quest GPS, which shows the coordinates of our firepower positions, attack targets, routes to them, and the tasks of neighboring units. So, Alpine Quest is an Android-only app for outdoor sports and activities, published by French developer Pisberia. So interesting that they're using that to their advantage. Anyway, that's him talking about not just Bakhmut, but also the wider area strategically, in terms of how the Russian forces are operating. Indeed, the ISW dips into that. I didn't mention that, but this in the eastern area, Liman area, they are quoting from that interview with Sursky and talking about the storm units there. But that's basically what's going on in Bakhmut. I just thought it'd be important to dip into what he had to say. So as we come to Avdivka, out of Bakhmut, come down further down south past New York, Touretsk, and Shumi, we come to Avdivka, and there has been recognition that the Ukrainians have ceded territory here, or the Russians have taken territory just just to the east of Novokolonove, moving on from Novobakhmutivka there, and north of Krasnohorivka. But the ISW, what does the ISW have to say? Well, Russian forces continue to conduct ground attacks in the area. Geolocated footage from Donetsk People's Republic militia on April the 21st, that's some days ago, shows that Russian forces advanced east towards Nivelska. So interesting. So that's Nivelska is down in this to the south of Avdivka, and it's important to stop the Russians from surrounding Pervomaisky, so it holds out down here. So let's see where the Russians are in terms of a geolocation at Nivelska. So they have, that's a position behind the lines that I already have anyway, so I wouldn't say that shows that they have made any advances. Let's see what other geolocations they talk about. So a Russian mill blogger's battle map claimed that Russian forces have advanced west of Kamyanka. Kamyanka is a place that's holding out next to the road coming down south here. So Kamyanka is holding out just there. The claim from ISW, a claim is that a Russian mill blogger is saying on their map that the Russians have made advances in south of Vasile in the area. That doesn't mean to say it's actually happened. Geolocated footage from the DNR says that they are operating south of Sivione and near Nivelska respectively. So that is to say that they are operating in this area. Well, we know that, and in the Nivelska area too. In fact, just to check one of those, here are some trenches that the Russians are storming, Ukrainian trenches that the Russians are storming. There's video footage of that. I won't show it to you because of appropriateness and whatnot, but that is in this area. So that is to say, if the Russians are storming Ukrainian trenches there, then the Ukrainians might have some purchase further down south than we might have imagined. So, yeah, interesting that is used to support. I don't know. They're not claiming that anyone's made any advances, but that there is activity in that area. It's just Ukrainian trenches. I guess it's pretty dynamic in the area, and trenches swap hands maybe multiple times a week, as we can see in the area to the north of Bakhmut as well. Syriac map says of that area by Novokalinove to the north, Russian forces and DPR have begun advancing west of the H20 and have reached a railway again close to the town of Novokalinove. So here is, is that the railway coming down there? So on my map, sorry to flip backwards and forwards, north and south, you've got the railway coming in here. And the Russians got up to that at Krasnohorivka, but then have been pushed back, and then it appears to be another railway line going up here, and they have made their way to that railway line and have interdicted it there. Not that I don't think that railway would have been particularly used at all, but as far as I understand, this railway might have been. I don't know if it still is. Obviously, it's rather close to the Russians as it stands. Rebar, pro-Russian source says south of Avdivka, Russian troops continue their assault on Ukrainian positions and approaches to Siverne. Despite the desperate Ukrainian resistance, assault units are getting closer to the settlements. I don't know that we've got any evidence to support that claim, but there is still fierce fighting around Avdivka, of course. So that's Avdivka, as according to Poulet Volant, that shows some movement for the Russians in that northern area, and they're still attempting the same kind of movements to the south. But as we come out of Avdivka, and come towards Vuhledar, there's no activity to report on here. But what the ISW does say is quite interesting. So the Russian 155th Naval Infantry Brigades, those are the Marines, the elite troops that have been reconstituted somewhere between 3 and 8 times, have reappeared in the Vuhledar area, implying that the brigade left the front line on an unspecified date to rest and reconstitute. The Ukrainians have assessed that the 155th is likely not at full combat strength. I imagine they aren't. They have been hammered repeatedly, but no activity really to report along this whole front line. Poulet Volant's mapping does continue to go along there, but doesn't show any arrows of either color in that area, and then tries to make some sense of the claims that are going on concerning Kherson and this river delta and who owns what and what is grey zone. My mapping has changed a little bit just to reflect that there could well be. I've gone with Deep State Map, to be honest. A mixture of Deep State Map and Syriac. So Syriac Maps still claims that Russians hold certain parts of the islands, Potemkin Island, a little bit of that, and to the southwest, but also I have Deep State Map saying that this is grey zone here, where there have been these claims about Ukrainians getting presence across the river. Well, the ISW talks a lot about this and about how people are arguing in the Russian military blogger community over what's going on. But it does say that Russian male bloggers also seized a chance to amplify claimed Russian military successes, including that Russian forces shot down a Ukrainian Su-25 that had supported Ukrainian raids across the Dnipro River. Indeed, Rebar talks about this, saying that Russian Manpad crew shot down a Ukrainian Su-25 near Veletensky, destroyed assault aircraft, was heading towards islands south of Kherson, where Ukrainian formations have been trying to gain a foothold in recent days. Indeed, there's geolocated footage of a burning something. I would generally believe that this is indeed a Su-25 that has been shot down, and that you can see that obviously there's oil burning off, fuel burning off there. You could try and deny it if you want, but I guess, I don't know. I would think it probably is. Right, let's try and put that into a bit of geolocation. So the burning of that Su-25 plane appears to be here. Shot down. Interesting. I'm not sure that would be correct. So after mild panic, I've put in another geolocated set of coordinates, and it appears, yeah, that's a lot more sensible, and that is indeed in Veletensky, which is where it was claimed to be shot down. So that's where apparently the Su-25 was shot down. But anyway, that pretty much concludes. Oh no, there's some more interesting stuff from the ISW here. So Milblog has also claimed that Russian airstrikes, particularly with modified guided FAB 500 bombs, improved Russian forces' ability to repel Ukrainian forces from the East Bank. And this is exactly what I said yesterday and the day before, that you can bet that you Russians are going to hit those troops with FAB bombs, and indeed that is what's happened that in that area. That's what the ISW is claiming. And then it says a Russian occupation official claimed that Ukrainian forces are operating a Hrim-2 short-range ballistic missile system in Zaporizhia Oblast. A Zaporizhia Oblast occupation official Vrogov claimed on April 25th that Ukrainian forces deployed a new Hrim-2 Thunder 2 missile system in Zaporizhia city. It reportedly has a maximum range of between 400 and 500 kilometers. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces targeted the Kerch Strait bridge with a Hrim-2 missile on April the 22nd. That's exactly what I said. Indeed, that was a rebar claim. But yeah, that's what I was reporting yesterday, that there are Hrim-2s, it seems, located both here, that have supposedly been hitting places like Feodosia, all the way over the other side of Crimea, and also from Zaporizhia all the way down to Kerch there. So if we look at the range of that, that is from Zaporizhia city, and that was to there. So that's 300 kilometers. And if you can start doing stuff like that, and also hitting from over here to there, that's what 500 Feodosia, and that's a bit less than that. That's just under 500. Wow! So they really do have 500 kilometer range. Then that's quite something. So that's definitely worthy of note. Anyway, that's today's Frontline update. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support. I will try and get back to you with a Ukraine war update extra video later today. In the meantime, enjoy your day.